Welcome then to the program. I'm going to ask you, as you'd expect, quite a lot about the former President Donald Trump, who is due in court in a couple of hours' time. Now, former Trump is facing an indictment against a former president, which makes it unique in American history. Felony charges, which one might expect to lead to long jail terms if they are proved. Do you think President Trump, as was, should receive unique treatment, Ambassador, from the court if he is found guilty? Should he be jailed?
Well, obviously, he will have an opportunity in court to try and refute the prosecution's case. And I think we should all acknowledge he's innocent until proven guilty, and the burden of proof obviously rests with the government. But I can tell you from my own experience, not just in national security, but as a former official of the Department of Justice, this is a very serious indictment. If I had taken the kinds of documents and behaved the way it's alleged Trump behaved when the government asked for the documents back, I'm positive I would be in jail already. So the main thing is that people understand whether you think it's fair or unfair that Hillary Clinton hasn't been charged or Joe Biden hasn't been charged. You have to look at these charges against Donald Trump on their own merits, and they are very, very serious. So we'll see what trial brings. Now, if he's convicted, there's very little doubt if some other official in the executive branch had done the same things and been found guilty, they would face very stiff prison sentences. I think ultimately it will be a matter for whoever the president is to decide whether to commute the sentence, maybe not pardon the president, but commute time in jail for the good of the country. I remember very well when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. It had controversy at the time, but it certainly cost Gerald Ford the 1976 presidential election. But many people think it was the right thing to do to try and heal the nation's wounds. So we're pretty far ahead of ourselves, since this trial may not occur until after the 2024 election, when Trump could pardon himself once he took office. But nobody should have any mistake here. These charges are very serious.
Indeed, and just for perfect clarity, to the extent that it's needed, it is your view that if these charges are proven in a court through due process, former Trump should be treated just as you would have been treated and serve jail time, whether or not the president decides subsequently to issue a pardon.
Yes, look, I think in the U.S. government, where we have thousands, tens of thousands of people who have security clearances, the slightest deviation from procedures under which they could be removed from their job, they could be prosecuted. Enlisted personnel in our services have spent time in jail. They've been given dishonorable discharges from the military. Careers have been destroyed. Just the other day, Governor DeSantis of Florida recalled that when he was in the Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps in Iraq and handled classified information, he said, if I had done something wrong, I would have been court-martialed. And he was right. That's what happens to subordinate people. And I think it's a question of leadership, that leaders don't just uphold the standards on classified material or many other things. They set an example. And when they deviate from the rules, if they're not treated as their subordinates would be, I think it undercuts discipline and good order across the government as a whole.
And that is a clear answer. What about the worry that there are supporters of Donald Trump who are now contemplating taking to the streets? The Georgia Republican, Kari Lake, has spoken at a state Republican gathering and spoken about taking up arms to defend Donald Trump. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's irresponsible. We'll see shortly in Miami what happens at the arraignment hearing or outside the arraignment hearing. I will just say, when Trump was indicted in New York and the hush money to the porn star financial fraud case 6 weeks or so ago, there were reports there would be riots from his supporters. It turned out the total number of pro-Trump demonstrators and anti-Trump demonstrators was smaller than the number of media covering the event. I don't know. I don't have any basis to predict in Miami, but it would be a mistake for Trump supporters of any kind to engage in violence. And if they did, I think they should be held fully accountable. There's no excuse for it. They can demonstrate, exercise their First Amendment rights, perfectly proper, but not go to violence.
It's a frightening idea, though, a frightening thought, Ambassador.
Well, it is, and it's a indication if that begins that there's a risk of Caesarism in the United States, and that's something that we've been fortunate to be able to avoid in our history, and I'd hate to see it start now.
Well, I think I want to come to that, but the judge in this case is, as you know, a Trump appointee, said to have been sympathetic to Donald Trump in past court appearances. In your judgment, it can only be your judgment, we can't know at this point, but in your judgment, is Donald Trump in real, genuine peril in this case?
Well, I think he is. The government has to prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt each of the 38 counts in the indictment that they filed last week. That's a heavy burden, but I don't think, given the unprecedented nature of prosecuting a former president, that they would have proceeded unless, as experienced prosecutors, they were rock solid certain that they could win this case. Whether the judge who's been assigned the case stays on the case or not, we don't know. If I were the prosecution, I would not at this point move to have her removed for prejudice because of her earlier rulings. I'd wait and see what happened. But I would also, and the special counsel has indicated this, they're going to press for a very speedy trial, which I think is necessary. And I would say, if I were Donald Trump and I thought myself innocent, I would want a speedy trial too. I would want to remove this cloud from over my head. I'd want this stain removed from my reputation. That's what an honest, innocent person would do. We'll see what Trump does perhaps later today.
Yes, indeed. Now, some of your fellow Republicans in Congress, some running for the Republican presidential nomination, though not all, are condemning this prosecution as politically motivated. Do you believe that is possible, Ambassador? What do you say to those Republicans who claim that?
Well, I would say, as an alumnus of the Department of Justice, I don't see this kind of political bias in the professional career attorneys who conduct these investigations. They are tough prosecutors, but I have not seen evidence of political bias. But I would say this to those who think Hillary Clinton should have been indicted or Joe Biden should be indicted. They say there's a double standard because they weren't and Donald Trump was. Look, let's assume that's right. Let's assume there is evidence of a double standard. How do you address that? Are these people really saying the way to address it is to default to no standard at all? That if Clinton and Biden have gotten a free pass, the answer is to give Trump a free pass? I think that's 100% wrong. Yeah. I think the answer is to restore the standard. And the way you do that is to take political bias out of these prosecutorial decisions. In this case, reading the indictment, if you took Trump's name out and just had Mr. Smith in there, people would say, objective observers would say, this is very serious. And Trump will have his day in court, that's for sure. He deserves it. And we'll see what the jury says.
Now tell me this, Ambassador. Frank Lutz, who's a well-respected American pollster, a Republican, I believe, he said in the last 24 hours, he believes Donald Trump can win the GOP nomination and win the White House. And if he does, according to Frank Lutz, it could mean the end of American democracy. An absolutely startling thing to say. Do you believe that could be true?
Well, I don't think it would mean the end of democracy, but I think it would bring grave peril. I said back in 2020 that I thought Trump's one term in office had caused the country damage, certainly caused great damage to the Republican Party, but it was all repairable. But that a second Trump term could cause damage that could be irreparable. And I think the breakdown of trust within the general population, which Trump stirs up at every opportunity, would be sorely tested during another Trump term. I agree with Frank Lutz's assessment that he might get the nomination, but I think he could only win if the opponent were Joe Biden. I think if the Democrats nominated almost anybody else, Trump would lose, and he might lose to Biden.
Well, is this then, in your view, a moment of peril, at the very least, for American democracy? Looking at it from outside, when I see what I see and hear what I hear, is it overstating it to say that this is a moment of importance comparable to the American Civil War?
No, I don't think it's that serious. I think that the gravest threat, if Trump won, would be there would be paralysis in the government for 4 years. Because I think the Democrats could retake the House and the Senate, which would mean gridlock on domestic issues. I don't think very many people would go to work for a Trump administration in senior positions, and those that did might well not get confirmed by the Senate. I mean, it could be a period of real chaos and affect American leadership worldwide, which at a time of the growing Chinese threat, the land war in Ukraine, the threat of terrorism and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction continuing, would put us in grave danger internationally. But there are too many Americans who are committed to the Constitution just to lay back and let it be destroyed. It would not come easily, even if Trump tried to do it.
Now, you've told me before, Ambassador, you believe a second Trump presidency could threaten America's leadership and even membership of NATO. Do you still believe that? And what would a Trump win mean for American and Western support for Ukraine in its war against the Russian invasion?
Well, I think it would be very dangerous. I think there is now loose within the Republican Party a strain of isolationism. It kind of comes and goes. There are many isolationists in the Democratic Party, too, who are concerned only about developments in America. But I think it's very serious that Trump would withdraw from NATO. And I think he said, for example, that in Ukraine, if he could just get Zelensky and Putin in a room, he could solve the problem in 24 hours. That, of course, is ridiculous. Trump's not competent to be the commander in chief of the United States or to handle our international affairs. He doesn't understand what's at stake, and he doesn't care to learn very much. So I would be gravely worried about the consequences of a Trump presidency from the international point of view, no doubt about it.
And the president would have the right, as president, to sign a document withdrawing America from NATO.
Right. There's some dispute over this, but it's my very clear view that the president alone makes the decision to withdraw from treaties, as George W. Bush did from the ABM treaty, as Donald Trump did from the INF nuclear treaty. That's a presidential decision.
Now, look, you also know that the second most prominent runner for the GOP nomination, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, is also skeptical about the case for American support for Ukraine. As you see that and listening to you today, tell me, are you ready now to declare your candidacy, Ambassador, for the White House?
Well, if I do declare my candidacy, I'll have to say it would be on an American media outlet where more potential constituents would be listening. But I've not made up my mind. This is a very unusual cycle, and I think there are others who are still looking at whether they're going to get in. Obviously, with the arraignment today, that's a significant development. We'll see what happens. Governor DeSantis has walked back his initial position on Ukraine somewhat, but I was very disturbed at his initial comments. I have to say I do believe in the power of redemption, so it may yet be that he gets back on the right path.
I must admit to you, I would have been surprised to hear you declare your candidacy on to me now on a British radio station, but it was worth a try. I imagine, given all that we've been discussing, you must be leaning towards running, if only to give the kind of views that you're airing now a proper hearing.
Well, I would be delighted to be on a debate stage with Donald Trump, no question about it. I'd particularly be delighted to be on a debate stage with him one-on-one. That may not happen, but that temptation is very strong.
Okay, look, you tell me, you have told me that Western security is at stake in this election. There is a threat, not just to American stability, but at least a threat to American democracy. I take it as read that you oppose a second term for Joe Biden. But given a choice between a Biden second term and a Donald Trump second term, with all the risks that you tell me go with that, what would you choose?
Well, I think it's a choice that nobody should have to make. In fact, public opinion polls in the United States are quite clear that almost 2/3 of the people do not want to see another Trump-Biden race for the presidency. In 2020, I'm a Maryland resident, so I had the option to write in the name of someone else, which I did. I wrote in the name of a real conservative Republican, since no one else meeting that description was on the ballot, and I expect I would do the same.
Yeah, I mean, I could point out the obvious, which is in the event of Donald Trump reaching the GOP nomination, it will be a choice between Trump or Biden for the White House? Would you be comfortable just standing aside, effectively abstaining in that choice?
No, because I live in Maryland, so that will be Joe Biden will win that state without any question. Maryland's electoral votes will go for Biden, and my vote will be irrelevant. But I will at least have the privilege of standing on principle rather than expediency.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are used to political instability in the United Kingdom, as well as I'm sure you know. Your state of mind now, just finally, your state of mind contemplating the state of your country and its politics, Ambassador, how do you feel?
Well, I would never bet against the United States. I think this is obviously a challenging time, but certainly from the perspective of the Republican Party, the task ahead is to do whatever is necessary to make sure Donald Trump doesn't get our nomination, because then the problem becomes a lot easier to solve.
Ambassador, thank you for your time. Good to talk to you again.